My name is Carter Shappy. I'm a visual artist, a printmaker, an illustrator, designer, and an art handler. My recent work and a lot of work in the past explores intersections of art and science. This work behind me, you can see, is based around these fractal patterns called viscous fingering. When one liquid of high viscosity mixed with a liquid of low viscosity, what happens is you create these really, really intricate patterns under pressure and also through a lifting process. So it's kind of a strange amalgamation of traditional printmaking processes and kind of experimental approaches. That's some of my recent work. So Anna approached me because I was Bigelow's first ever artist in residence back in 2016. I spent about 4 months there in the summer working closely with one of their senior research scientists, Dr. Steve Archer, as well as a research technician, Carlton Rauschenberg. And we were loosely exploring, again, intersections between art and science. And the end result was this 21-foot tall hanging printed sculpture called Colorcosm. So the overall shape of Colorcosm, which I'll show you in a minute here, is emulated from this experimental water enclosure device that Steve and his team used in some of the research that he was doing back in 2016. This is called a mesocosm. Essentially, it's a water enclosure that's used out in open water that's suspended in a buoyancy structure, and it contains a sliver of the water column in which they can manipulate water chemistry to see how the biology responds. And in his case, they were looking at how phytoplankton and other oceanic bacteria were responding to the increasing acidity, projected levels of acidity, and in turn seeing how that affected their production of a specific type of gas that becomes aerosolized and helps form cloud coverage. So this is another image of those structures. This is when they're actually suspended in the water. They're floating with these steel buoyancy structures. And this is the piece. This is Colorcosm. As you can see, it takes on that cylindrical tube shape. It also encapsulates a lot of conversations in a variety of different topics, but particularly on how visible light operates in the ocean. So as you can see, it's this sort of prismatic arrangement of colors from top to bottom. Red and the warmer colors are absorbed closest to the ocean surface, and blue and violet penetrate deepest. And also through the spacing of these rings, it's supposed to point to this kind of exchange. As you move up from the bottom of the ocean, there's more and more activity that's going on that's kicking up molecules into the atmosphere. And there's this pretty much perpetual exchange of gases that's kind of unseen. And then it's printed on the outside, screen printed, with these kind of abstract organic patterns that were extracted digitally from a series of scanning electron microscope images that were taken at the laboratory. And these were taken of little samples of materials that I use frequently in my practice, such as little tiny copper fragments from copper plates that I print, foraged or gathered algae, coralline algae, seaweed, plastic debris, things of that nature. So that 4-month residency entailed lots of conversations with Archer about what he did as a scientist and also what I do as an artist, and exploring some of the overlaps, but also just trying to better understand what he does, what his research means overall. So at any given day, there would be sort of lab demos where he would walk me through the laboratory or set me up with one of the research associates or research technicians, and spending sort of a day shadowing them to see what they do. So there was a lot of time spent looking at under microscopes. There was a lot of time spent sort of just browsing the campus, which is a really beautiful area up in East Booth Bay, right on the Daramuscata estuary. So a lot of inspiration too was pulled from just the building itself and the campus, which is a really spectacular place. It's this beautiful, beautiful little hill overlooking the estuary, and the building is largely made of glass. So it's got a great level of transparency, which is why I chose the material that I chose. We're sort of helping everything kind of flow through the piece and all of these different angles that you can look through the piece out to outside and through the architecture as well. So for this project, I've been specifically brought on as a sort of lead preparator. And for those of you who don't know what a preparator is, typically in the art world, predominantly in either galleries or institutions or museums specifically, they have what we call preparators or art handlers, people who handle the art, they install it. Sometimes they work with conservators to clean it, to repair it. So for this project, I'm working as a preparator to design and sort of lead the fabrication of a overall hanging system for the many different parts and pieces that are planned for this installation. So off the bat so far, we're looking at a kind of a grid-like system so that we can hang kind of intuitively during the installation process. So some of it will be planned out obviously beforehand, but we wanted a little bit of flexibility since there's so many different artists and there's so many different types of objects. We wanted some flexibility and some decision-making to be made on the spot. So there'll be sort of a grid that'll be worked into the piece, potentially in kind of a sea surface-like manner, mimicking the sea surface. So one of the larger components to this project is the large right whale that's planned to be made by artist Andy Rosen. And it's a very large object. So hopefully the plan is to have this rigged before we have our sort of grid-like system in place for hanging the smaller objects. And that will entail a team of art handlers and artists working together to essentially hoist this large whale up in potentially pieces, getting it in position, and then getting our overall hanging structure in and hanging the smaller objects around it. And this is something that I've been doing for a number of years now, mostly in the Portland area, but as well throughout sort of the coastal area, working with institutions like the Portland Museum of Art, Maine College of Art, and also private companies and corporations to either install artworks, clean them, or just handle them and temporarily move them. I've worked with a couple local artists here who are more established. Allison Hildreth is someone who I've worked with for a very long time. And recently we worked on her piece called The Feathered Hand, which is hanging in the Portland Public Library. And myself and a team of six other art handlers de-installed that piece, which is 300 or so glass puppets that are suspended from a similar grid that we're designing now. And we cleaned it, made some repairs, and then reinstalled the piece. So this is something that I've been doing for a little while now. And yeah, I think working on a number of projects in the past with different artists and clients and institutions, there's this term thrown around a lot, it's collaboration. And I think that meaning has changed significantly, in my opinion, throughout my career as an artist. And it's really refreshing to be a part of a project like this that really embraces in my opinion, the definition of that term, which is a group of people coming together and not stopping at sort of defined roles, even though those roles are there, but being able to sort of cross boundaries and work in a very multifaceted, multidisciplinary way where everybody's sort of influencing everybody's role in the project, which is something that I'm experiencing with this project. It's really, really exciting to be a part of.